Hello. So, a little while ago, one of my friends asked me to just try to explain how I personally sort of started to find my way on my personal perception of my timeline, synchronized with this pattern that I believe is imprinted in the scriptures. And and so I thought, okay, maybe today I could go into that a little bit more, okay? Because I want to explain one of the questions I have is about the very nature of the Bible. And if it has been influenced by our ancestors and possibly by an advanced civilization that had risen up, but then something happened that caused the demise, and that there was wisdom that they personally had attained to, but realized because of the length of time that might pass, how could that information be preserved? And, by making this information in a Bible that would be a spiritual religious text, and that they maybe knew that our nature as a species is to have this, a spiritual side, and that perhaps by connecting it to religion, connecting it to all these values, would be a way of preserving that information. But it's like a book that is written in layers, just like code, when they say read between the lines, and how there can be a letter, but then certain capital letters misplaced and you put them together and there's another word inside the message. That's kind of like what I'm seeing for myself. I tend to notice patterns. I always was really good at putting puzzles together as a child. So, it's just sort of something I naturally am inclined to. Okay, so then what I'm saying is it that in the universe itself and the way the universe maintains its order, that they were able to observe this repeating of patterns, like our solar system and our galaxy, everything is turning, and it turns, and not every single thing is in the exact same place, but there's still the pattern. And so is it that with the passage of time, that within everything, nature, there are large patterns, medium patterns, and small patterns, and they nest together and inevitably repeat? That's what I believe this is about, with the Fibonacci being in the Bible, in the book of Revelation, and also, as I said, in the book of Genesis. So to me, that is a clue that whoever behind the scenes, whether they're higher beings or angels, which I'm going to make one about that, they knew about this cycle, and they wanted to communicate to us when we are at this time again, which I believe is a spiritual evolutionary emergence, like a next stage of maturing, just like when we go from a child and we go through puberty and we physically become an adult. Well, perhaps there's a matching process of spiritual maturing, that because of circumstances on earth, that second spiritual maturing has been suppressed, impeded with, delayed, that kind of thing. So that's why I feel these patterns, these historical stories in the Bible, have been recorded in this way for a different purpose. And I believe the purpose is to navigate where we are in the stream of time. But the idea is, instead of being a boat without a sail and without a rudder, without oars, this information can empower us to navigate this moving stream of time, these events, okay? By having knowledge, we can be more purposefully orientated, that we want to stay in the fastest part of the stream, or it's like the jet stream in the sky. It's like the fastest, vein of where the wind is blowing, to move. See, so what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to go from one paradigm to the next as swiftly and smoothly as possible. And we are living within this greater force of living movement. Okay? I think that's what this is about. And so I want to share the first thing that sort of began this realization with me, to look at this deeper. And I was reading in Revelation. So I just want to say, for me to use the scriptures, it's the book that's influenced my awareness of this topic. So that's why I'm sharing, the scriptures, because that's just what helped me get to where I am. And so I'm sure in another religious book, if I was in India, it would have the same effect. Because it's, I think, connecting us, even to the higher wisdom just of our subconscious mind. But what got my attention and made me believe that the mid-1800s are very significant, when the Industrial Revolution really hit. Okay? And it's based on Revelation chapter 9, where it speaks about this interesting event. And it says, an angel is sounding, and he saw a star from heaven which had fallen to the earth, and the key of the bottomless pit was given to him. Now, what's important is the metaphors here. You see, this is part of the clue. So Jesus says to the believer, he will give the believer, the bright morning star. So, and in Old Testament, when Jacob was having a dream, he saw his brothers as stars. So the Bible does use the metaphor that a star can also symbolize an awakened person. Okay, so this could be a reference, this star that fell could be a reference to what we attribute to Adam, but it could be a reference to the entire race having been in a higher mental, spiritual state, and we fell. Okay? And then what happened is a key to the bottomless pit was given to him. And I'm like, okay. So then he opens this bottomless pit, and smoke went up out of the pit, smoke like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by the smoke of this pit. And out of the smoke came locusts upon the earth, and power was given them, as the scorpions of the earth have power. Well, I was just walking and thinking, and what hit me, because of the work I do with regenerative agriculture, a lot of people that are in the environmental movement contact me. It's just organic, right? And a lot of people are very concerned and very worried, and all type of fear and concern potentially can also distort our values. And we can think we're so right, and we can start thinking we have a right to force other people to live according to our interpretation of what's happening. So with climate change and the doom that many see, we have to be very careful. We need to be open and honest and truthful. If some people are really afraid, okay, they need to not be manipulative and deceiving humanity, because nothing has more power than truth. Nothing has more power. And we need to be thoroughly, authentically empowered and strengthened. And every human being has the capacity to rise up, okay, in their character and be motivated by a higher purpose. And this is what I believe is the strength we need to tap into now. And so when I reflected on the scripture, the kind of aha moment I had was the discovery of fossil fuels coincides with the Industrial Revolution, which also coincided with the Bible printing societies, mid-1800s. So we had this, the Bible had been really taken over by the big monolithic churches, and they utterly controlled the information in this book, and only, it was, chained to the podium in these old churches, and you had to go to church to hear it, period. No lay person had access to the Bible. Mid-1800s, that changed. Mid-1800s, Industrial Revolution. Mid-1800s, the discovery of fossil fuels. Now, where do fossil fuels come from? But deep in the earth. So I thought, oh, the bottomless pit. Now, when it said smoke went up out of the pit, like smoke of a great furnace, I went, oh my goodness, what do we do with fossil fuels? We burn them. I mean, the primary number one thing we do is burn them. So the smoke, like a great furnace, the furnace, what if the great furnace is a metaphor for every single engine and device that is burning the fossil fuels, burning the coal, burning the oil, burning it. Okay? Now they also, another thing I discovered, there's a direct correlation, hockey stick match, of the introduction of fossil fuels into society and the population explosion. Okay, it's completely synchronized. And the reason is we immediately began to use fossil fuels and machines to produce more food. And as we produce more food, it stimulates the population. Okay, so then I went, okay. And of course, it darkens the air. But in this case, it's possible that the industrialized effect on the world, the darkening of the sun and the air, also could be a reference to the spiritual darkening. The pursuit of these physical indulgences also could have had a dampening and darkening of the human integrity. So that's important, okay? So then it says, what? Locusts come out of the smoke. And I realized, I think the human race and the exploding population as a result of the burning of the fossil fuels, so the byproduct of burning something is the smoke, and the byproduct is the locusts come out of the smoke. And what happens is, because there's a reference in Joel too, it speak about very parallel of this locust that come upon the earth. In front of them, the earth is the Garden of Eden, and behind them is a scorched, barren wilderness. And the one thing we probably all could agree on is through the industrialization and the use of machines, the ability for the human race to accelerate the consumption of the planetary systems has never been higher. Never, ever been higher. So then what happened, this is the first time when I had this realization that I could pin an event, a global significant event, the Industrial Revolution, the discovering of fossil fuels, the exploding of the human population, in this metaphor of Revelation, which has its origins in the mid-1800s, is when I started to go, okay, I found a pin where I could line up my timeline with these ancient prophecies of events that were expected to come. And so is it that our ancestors, or the wisdom of the universe that influenced people, is it like a realization that this inevitability of this cycle It will just keep repeating. And we either learn it, and if we don't learn it, we fall back down steps, and that cycle repeats again and again until we have enough consciousness to be aware on how to master our thoughts. And possibly the part of that mastering is realizing the plasticity of the relationship we have with the creative universe, and that it is responsive to our state of being. Okay? So then, that is the beginning of the first moment I personally had my own eureka that made sense to me. Okay? To me. Because I think this is about each of us grounding ourselves in clarity. Okay, in clarity. I think this is really important. And this is another possible reason we have these ancient texts like the Bible, is again, our ancestors may have realized that their future descendants would be so inundated by all this information, inundating their consciousness, that in order to go from the one paradigm to the other, they would need something really solid to rest their perception of reality on. What they could confidently say, this is my truth. This is the truth I choose. Okay? Not because someone's telling me to choose it, but that to give us the tools that we could come to that conclusion ourself. This could be why Jesus is also referred to as the rock mass. Something solid enough that at a personal level we could rest our perceptions on, no matter what anyone else around us said. I think this is important, because what we're going through is not just physical, and we're so disadvantaged, like I said in previous videos about the quantum field and the observer effect and these phenomena. We're just like starting like in kindergarten understanding this. So the more we can find a narrative that we are even inspired by and really believe is possible, I feel this is essential. To navigate, we must navigate a timeline that we can easily see as possible. That's another one, okay? Because we need to believe it to participate in the solidifying of it, in my opinion. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to share goes back to that paper chart. Because once I started to see this and I started collecting these little examples, so I began to treat it like a jigsaw puzzle, literally. And you know how you match the green parts and the blue parts and the land part? Okay, so that's what I started doing. I started trying to look at these accounts and then match them up. So one thing in the Bible, there's a lot of reference to a week. Like the creative cycle was 6 days of creation and 1 day of rest. So it's a 7-day, but not necessarily literal 7 days, but maybe epochs of time. Okay, and then there's a reference to Jesus being cut off in the half of the week. Okay, so the Bible uses these interesting internal numbers. So then I thought, oh, okay. So I just imagined that Jesus in the timeline. And so I said, okay, well, let's just make this hypothetical timeline based on a week, a structure of a week. And the first day was Adam. And the last day would be the millennia, the 1,000 years, because creation had 6 creative days and then this day of rest. And we're promised to enter this day of rest, which I think has to do with a change in the perception of the very function of the universe, and how through this cooperative spirit and sense of well-being, the universe organically brings to us and provides for us what we need. So I kind of think there's something there. So what I did is then I said, okay, I'm going to break it down based on this 7-day week, a huge 7-day week, that the whole Bible is based on this 7-day cycle. Okay, and there's other reasons for it, but I want, but so what I want to show you is that's what I did. So then it was the story of Adam, and he was in this beautiful place, which we call the garden, and then he was put out into the wilderness. Okay, but then he died. So then I kind of have it like he's in the wilderness, all the way to the Great Euphrates event, or the Great Water Crossing event, okay? And then the next outstanding individual is Abraham. So first of all, I want you to show I have 7. So 1, 2, 3, so Jesus, 4, 6, all the way 7. And so Jesus is right here. So you could say he's the half of the week, because there's 3 events behind him and 3 in front. So that's an example of how I started to try to decipher this repeating patterns in history. And it really was helpful, because I did find something that was really synchronizing. So what was synchronizing is the water events synchronize, the time period in the wilderness. There's a match, okay? And another one that was very interesting, I didn't expect, was at these transition times, there would be visitations by angelic beings every time. So there, because even in the Garden of Eden, it's, there was these angelic beings communicating with Adam, and then Abraham was visited by angelic like men, and then, of course, the nation of Israel, when they came out of Israel, like when they came out, there was this angel that said was ahead and behind, and it just keeps going. And then Jesus had, they say, it's just every time that there is this paradigm advancement, a change, a really distinct change in the perception or the values or how the persons or the people perceive themselves. Like so much, the Israelites were in bondage in Egypt. And Egypt, remember, it had the obelisk. And the fact that these city-states of our day have obelisks, that's just another example how it's syncing our timeline back to that time when the people were going to emerge out of that type of bondage that was in Egypt. So the thing that I found that I feel it's a massive accumulation. So what's happening is there's the stories of Adam, the stories of Abraham, the stories of Israel, the stories of Jesus. They're like Russian dolls nested inside. They keep synchronizing, and we can see patterns in all of our events that link to all of those. And what I think has happened to us when we're studying the Bible, we don't see that they are like the story being retold just in a different way. And even the way Jesus taught, I think, is a clue, because it said he wouldn't teach without metaphor. So he told many different stories, but always about the same thing. It's a pearl, it's the kingdom is like a seed, it's a sower, it's like over and like a dragnet and the fish, and over he tells about the same thing with many different metaphor. Well, is that a clue that all these accounts are also in themselves like a great metaphor of the cycle? And the cycle that's coming towards us is the opportunity to make a really important choice. A really important choice. So the early church, so what I also see is in time, it's like we're taking steps through the wilderness. All these events, like the human race has been wandering in the wilderness since Adam, the same as the nation of Israel wandered in the wilderness on a small scale. And so it's like, okay, you see how it can nest, it can nest in ways that's so cool, so exciting. So then what I seen is because the Fibonacci pattern gets more and more complex as it amplifies, okay, more pieces, but it also helps us see the pattern more clearer. Okay, as we build our puzzle, more pieces that fit, it's clearer and clearer to see the bigger picture. And so then what I saw for myself that really helped me is there's a massive convergence occurring that also synchronizes with the two witnesses. Okay, so I want to explain this with the two witnesses where I feel myself, we are at this moment of the two witnesses. So when the Israelites were going to enter the promised land, okay, this promise, future, the Bible says, God said, I place life and death before you. Choose life and keep living. Very interesting that our choices ultimately can be reduced down to a choice. Is it supporting life or reducing life? That's pretty, significant for us to think about. So now with the two witnesses, you see, this is a very important story about the two witnesses, because I believe we have entered into the time of the revival of the two witnesses. And the standing up on their feet, okay, the coming back to life of the two witnesses, I believe is linked to when the Bible began to be available again to the world. The Bible printing societies broke through and dismantled the stranglehold all the religions had on the Bible, which was restricting its message. Okay, so that sinks. And so they stood on their feet, okay, and then it said they went into a cloud. Now, what's significant about that is when the Israelites did go free from Egypt, and if the freedom of Egypt is also about a mental process, if it's, yes, our body physically gets subject to servitude, yes, but I believe this freedom is very much deeper, and it's about our consciousness being manipulated and our consciousness being captured and our perception of reality being hemmed in more than anything. Okay? So when they were coming out of Egypt, there was immediately the guidance through the Ark of the Covenant and the cloud. And I think the cloud could be the electron cloud, and that it's linked to quantum science and the field of all possibilities. And that when we as a species now are awakening to the true nature of our reality and we enter the cloud, is when our consciousness is realizing we are connected to the field, not just the body, that there's a connection to the field. And we are waking to that. That's what we're coming into. And so that's what I wanted to share. And I think it has to do with this topic of manifestation, but it's like, it's a living response from the universe. It's like we're a child of the universe, a child of God, and the universe loves us, God loves us, and is responding in a way so much more intimate and personal than we have been conditioned to perceive. And so I think that that's the entering of the cloud, and that's where we're at in the stream of time. So that's a pretty big one. I hope you enjoy that. And that was sort of just an example of my personal perceptions. So more. I'll keep sharing. Have a wonderful day and manage what you choose to believe.